Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We're constantly being assailed by all that is being brought in through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. The five aggregates are always burning, never satisfied. But when the mind learns to be consistent, diligent, and willing to put in the effort to observe these as they arise and as they vanish, as they arise and as they vanish, and they always switch places. The predominance shifts constantly, constantly, constantly. But if we persist and if we are able to continue maintaining, having that observation, especially yoniso manasikara, which is the wise reflection, the wise attention, without attaching story to it, to these, then we start seeing a pattern. We start seeing a pattern. And it's the same throughout. We start seeing that each of these is unreliable. We start seeing that each of these is empty. We see that each of these is unstable, undependable, and therefore impermanent. And for the mind or the heart that has been taking the Dhamma in more and more and more and more, developing that trust, soon enough that sense of impermanence, that understanding that impermanence, I'm seeing impermanence, I'm seeing the unreliability, I'm being let down. We start seeing that there is this tremendous sense of suffering. Usually it manifests in the form of disappointment, after disappointment, and if we have enough wisdom developing, we will see through these patterns and we're going to understand how, why do I keep on tagging along with whatever storyline that these, say, the senses keep throwing in front of me? And I bite. That's their bait, and I take the bait. So when we encourage individuals to keep having the diligence, the heedfulness, it's simply to train that muscle of mindfulness so that it can stick to it and you don't buy it anymore. This narrative of the aggregates or the senses coming and telling you something to dissuade you, to pull you away from seeing the true nature of things. That things are unreliable, unstable, despite what you've been told, what you have told yourself, what others have told you, that things are the things that happen to us depend on conditions, and therefore they will crumble, leaving us with disappointment after disappointment and suffering, therefore. And that essentially there is no one to take the blame for any of it, other than the missed opportunity. Missed opportunity can be termed as avidya, a moment that has been allowed to pass us by without us having invested a little bit of wisdom into it. And then with more and more of those series of moments that are absent of mindfulness and wisdom, we get what we call a human life of a patujjana, or a life of a patujjana, an ordinary, uneducated, untrained being. So let us not miss any opportunities, especially when it comes to listening to the Dhamma. It is a wonderful tradition that has started from Lord Buddha. When he gave us the Dhamma, he explained to us the teaching so generously, so caringly for over 45 years. And so many individuals have attained simply by listening. Simply by listening. That has not changed. It is there. Unfortunately, many don't have the willingness to listen with an open heart, an open mind. We bring too much of our thinking, our kileshas, our defilements into the presence of the Dhamma, and they cannot coexist. The heart will recognize the Dhamma when it sees it, when it hears it. But we need to give the heart the opportunity to do so. By having the defilements stay away, at least during the time that we are exposing ourselves to the Dhamma. So I invite you to, whenever you're listening to a Dhamma talk, whenever you're reading a sutta of where the Lord Buddha gives a discourse, or any one of his arahant, Arya Savakas, please allow the words to sink in, unperturbed, undiluted, unfiltered, unscreened, and just let them fall where they may, with a sense of humility and trust. After all, if we don't have that trust, that faith, that confidence, saddha, That's the first of the 5 spiritual faculties, which turn into 5 powers, by the way. With that saddha, we bring out, we muster extra energy to put in and to reinvest into the process of sati, to re-engage again. Okay, I missed a few hours where I was completely oblivious. Fine. Now I'm not going to miss this moment. Whether it's the breath, whether it's the heart sending out metta, or the mind. Just sticking to it. That is how powerful the faith can play a role in eventually bringing us all the way to Panya. So, simply by listening to the Dhamma, countless beings attained Sotapanna stage, countless beings attained Sakadagami stage, which is the once returner. So many beings attained Anagami stage, which is a non-returner, and many who have already done their work in previous lives by simply listening attained arahantship. So please let us not minimize the wonder that merely listening, but listening with one's heart and mind open to the words of Lord Buddha, teaching the truth, how much that can change one's world. So with that, I would like to have us start today's sutta, which in our Sutta Exploration series, I believe this is either week 5 or 6, probably 5. So this comes to us from the Anguttara Nikāya, book of the 8ths, and it is Sutta number 30. Anuruddhamahāvitakka Sutta. Anuruddha and the thoughts of a great man, or Anuruddha and his great thoughts. However, different translators have used different ways of using, defining it, but it's basically the same thing. Just to recap, because I mentioned a few things last week, even though we weren't doing sutta studies, but just to kind of give you a prelude or a backstory, Venerable Anuruddha was one of the princes who also became, he went forth, so he took on the robes after Lord Buddha visited, after his awakening, his home town, his kingdom, and he happens to be one of Lord Buddha's cousins. So very quickly he was able to really perfect the jhanas, especially the 4th jhana. And this allowed him to penetrate into certain abhinyas, which are psychic abilities, if you will. And he was known as the disciple par excellence with the ability to use the Dibba Chakku, or the divine eye. So he was able to see anywhere in existence, no matter which realm, or even a human realm. So he had full access to it. So, which is something that one can develop. So he was, he developed in that rather quickly. And he was one of those students that really shows up in different places in the Nikāyas, in the suttas. He was a diligent meditator, humble meditator, and always eager to help other students. Now, what had happened was he had reached a point where he was no longer satisfied with these skills. And one day he comes to Venerable Sariputta, and Venerable Sariputta hears him say, Friend, Avuso, friend, Sariputta, I have the ability to see across 100,000 galaxies, and I'm able to maintain my meditation diligently because my energy is so impeccable, is so on point. I have so much energy in my meditation. And he says, but I am still struggling to attain arahantship. And very quickly, Venerable Sariputta kind of brushes all these aside and says, friend Anuruddha, you mentioning about these abilities or ability of seeing across so many galaxies is demonstrating conceit in you. You telling us about your ability to have so much energy to maintain your meditation object, etc., is demonstrating the restlessness in you. And you mentioning to us that you are still struggling and still have not yet attained is demonstrating your worry in you. So basically, he was very much, he was a straight shooter, if you will. Very kind, though, so loving, Venerable Sariputta. And he says, why don't you just put all these aside and just focus on the deathless, the amata, dhatu, the deathless element. So he encourages him to go off, and he says, that's all you need. Forget about the Dibba Chakku, these divine eye, whatever, because they don't take you anywhere other than keeping you in samsara. So it is that those series of events that have led Venerable Anuruddha to go and to meditate, and he's diligently practicing. And while he's sitting, he has these thoughts. Originally 7 thoughts, but then we're going to see Lord Buddha coming in and advising him with more. So that is the background. So, and he is staying far from where Lord Buddha was staying. But one of the, shall we say, habits or actions that Lord Buddha liked to engage in was to scan the world, the universe. When in the Dhamma, when we say the world, loka, we're talking about everything that is, in the form, or even in some cases, the formless, like even the Brahman lokas. So the Lord Buddha would look and scan existence and see who is ready, who's really close. And he would usually show up there and give the necessary instruction, the necessary push, the nudge to get them to see the Dhamma or to attain full arahantship. So that's the see. So let's begin. Anuruddhamahāvitakka Sutta. Once, the Blessed One was staying at the deer park in the Bhesakala forest among the Sungsumara rock or peaks in the land of the Bhaggas. It was, Sungsumara is crocodile, the crocodile rock or peak, which looked from the side when you looked at it, apparently it looked like a crocodile. So it was during that time that the Venerable Anuruddha was staying in the eastern bamboo forest in the land of the Chetis. While in his seclusion, the following thought arose in the mind of the Venerable Anuruddha. This Dhamma is for one with few desires, and not for the one with many desires. This Dhamma is for one content and satisfied, and not for one who is discontent and dissatisfied. This Dhamma is for one who looks for seclusion, and not for one who delights in company or enjoys associating with others. This Dhamma is for one who is diligent with aroused effort, not for the lazy. This Dhamma is for one established in continuous mindfulness, not for one lacking in mindfulness. This Dhamma is for the one who has the stability of the heart, not for the distracted. And 7, this Dhamma is for the wise, not for those lacking in wisdom. So this was basically a series of conclusions, if you will, that his meditation and all his years of being a bhikkhu and practicing have led him to understand. So this was his thesis. And he was sitting there contemplating these points that if you take any of these things out, the holy life cannot be lived properly. This also indicates that he was actually tasting the fruits of what Venerable Sariputta had told him. The teaching, the very brief teaching that he gave him, his friend Venerable Sariputta, this shows that his practice was bearing fruit. And you can tell when he's talking about santuti or contentment, this Dhamma is for someone who is contented or content and satisfied. That santuti, that sense of where the mind is no longer going out, whether through the senses or being taken for a ride by the khandhas, the body, feeling, the memories, mental constructions, constant, and sense awareness or vijnana. So he was going deeper, in other words. Now, meanwhile, the Blessed One, knowing the thoughts that arose in the mind of the Venerable Anuruddha, as quickly as a strong man would extend out his bent arm or bend his extended arm, suddenly disappeared from the deer park in the Bhesakala forest. And that's a usual term that we're going to see a lot throughout the Nikāyas, where they use this example of as fast as a strong man would just extend his bent arm and pull it back. So it's like this. So it's less than a second. The flicker of your eyelids. So that's the example that they use, the metaphor that they use for, in most cases, Lord Buddha disappearing from one area and then reappearing in another part of the universe of existence. So the Lord Buddha disappears from the deer park, from among the Sumsumara peaks in the land of the Bhaggas, as he reappeared before the Venerable Anuruddha in the eastern bamboo forest in the land of the Chetis. Once there, the Blessed One sat on his prepared seat, and the Venerable Anuruddha, after paying homage to the teacher, sat on the side. So I mentioned this before, but when the Buddha would disappear and reappear somewhere, or actually travel physically, temporally, let's say, from one place to the next, most of his students, advanced or otherwise, they would normally have the seat prepared for Lord Buddha, their teacher, just in case Lord Buddha showed up. I guess that was also like a wishful thinking on their part, hopeful that maybe the Lord Buddha the teacher would be, feeling it necessary to present here. So that's one example of Venerable Anuruddha having such a seat prepared in his cave, one for himself and one for the Lord. And the Blessed One said this to the Venerable Anuruddha: Sadhu, Sadhu Anuruddha, it is good that you are reflecting on these thoughts of a great man, which are: 1, this Dhamma is for one with few desires, and not for the one with many desires. 2, this Dhamma is for one content and satisfied, and not for one who is discontent or dissatisfied. 3, This Dhamma is for one who looks for seclusion and not for one who delights in company or enjoys associating with others. This Dhamma is for one who is diligent with aroused effort, not for the lazy. 5. This Dhamma is for one established in continuous mindfulness, not for one lacking in mindfulness. 6. This Dhamma is for the one who has the stability of the heart, not for the distracted, basically samadhi. 7. This Dhamma is for the wise, not for those lacking in wisdom. And this is where the Lord Buddha adds one more, which makes it part of the book of eights in the Anguttara Nikāya. So you have a lot of, it's numerical discourses. So here we have 8 items in this sutta. So all the suttas have to have a relevancy to the number or listing of eight items. So that's what makes this now, because of this addition of one more on top of what Venerable Anuruddha had, the 7, makes it placed in this category of books of 8. So, however, Anuruddha, you must also reflect on this 8th thought of a great man. That is, this Dhamma is for the one who delights in the non-proliferation of thoughts, the one who enjoys non-proliferation of ideas or concepts, and not for those who delight in the constant proliferation of thoughts, or the ones who enjoy the constant proliferation of ideas or concepts. We love our stories, don't we? We love our narratives. We love where they take us, the fairy tales, the things that are presenting us with different colors, different experiences, all these things. These, in Pali, they're called papanchas, mental proliferation. It just keeps multiplying like the limbs of a hydra. When you cut in the Greek mythology or even in biology, if you cut it, instead of one head of the dragon, let's say, it shows up as 2 or 3 or 7. And then you cut those and those multiply. So thoughts are like that. Thoughts are like that. Try fighting with a thought. This happens a lot with individuals, which makes most of us nowadays, who face anxiety, who are unable to sleep, for example, because of worries, which come from thoughts. And many times we engage in combat with the thoughts by using more thoughts. The intention is good, but the method is completely wrong. So we love to proliferate, to add, to multiply indefinitely. But that creates this in the mind, the agitation. Because this 8th item that the Lord Buddha is adding, it is like the crown of all the rest, all the 7 points that Venerable Anuruddha had listed. Because if you have this, then arahatship will not be happening. In fact, the other ones are also going to get agitated and perturbed. Hence, the Buddha's insistence on Venerable Anuruddha also using these, using this on top of the others as his guide to push forward, because he still was not an arahant yet, Venerable Anuruddha. And Lord Buddha continues, in this way, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, then for as long as you wish, by secluding the mind from sensual desires and unwholesome states of mind, you will enter and abide in the first jhana, which brings with it joy and pleasure that is the result of seclusion, while the mind is still accompanied by thinking and pondering. What this is saying is, so long as the person is engaged with likes and dislikes, lusting after things, whether ideas, whether physical or not, intellectual, mental, emotional, whatever. Or dislikes, anything that makes the person be disgusted by something. So long as there is that emotional, mental investment into these sensibilities, if you will, then the mind is perturbed. You're still caught in the mundane. So you cannot step foot, if you know, for using a term, you cannot experience, in other words, the first jhana, because you're too locked into the physical world, or the just kama loka, or the sensual world. They cannot coexist at that point. So it's a supraman. You're going higher than the mundane. So, but in this state, which is the first jhana, there still is the subvocal speech, meaning thinking and pondering. You can still practice. You can still say words. Oh, what is this? What's happening? Oh, this is interesting. You know, for each person is different, of course, but in essence, the pattern is the same. The presence of vitakka vichara, or thinking and pondering. Moving on. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, then for as long as you wish, by going beyond thinking and pondering, you will enter and abide in the second jhana. So now the person goes, they let go of their attachment to, the mental attachment to thinking and pondering. Mindfulness is there so that you're aware of what's happening. You're seeing. And suddenly you notice there's no thinking and pondering. That's where meditators usually start to kind of get the whiff that there are in the second jhana realm, if you will, where the heart is internally stabilized and tranquil and brought to a single point, which brings with it joy and pleasure that is the result of concentration. The joy is so intense. It starts from obviously the first jhana, that the body feels like vibrating with goosebumps that are sustained, in an extended manner. And the mind, meanwhile, is still agitated, by the way, but there's this sense of joy, pleasure. It's not as intense because there's the introduction of tranquility coming in. You're sensing it more and more than you did before in the first jhana. Because we're moving towards upekkha, which is down the line in the fourth jhana and up. So, moving on. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, then for as long as you wish, while equanimity grows within the mind and the joy subsides, you will abide dispassionate but mindful and fully aware as you experience the soothing relaxation within the body. Mindful and fully aware. The jhanas used to be practiced at the time of the Buddha, even when he was not the Buddha. He was just a meditator, an ascetic. This is what distinguishes the jhanas practiced by Lord Buddha, taught by Lord Buddha after his awakening. This is how he even became an arahant, a Buddha. He kept being aware of what was happening in the mind, versus what to this day to some level is being practiced in India and other places, where the mind goes into complete, like, there's a lockdown, if you will. There is no mindfulness of what's happening in the body, in the mind. You're just locked in and gone, in a sense. If somebody comes over with a hacksaw and cuts off a limb, you won't feel it. Well, where's the wisdom then? How can we gain from these jhanas? So jhanas, as taught by Lord Buddha, I'm not talking about the commentaries. Like when you go to Venerable Buddha Gosha or Visuddhimagga, it veers off into those other traditions that the Buddha didn't want to have anything to do with. And Venerable Buddha Ghosha brought those because he was a Hindu, actually, a Brahmin from, and then he came and became a Buddhist, and then he fell in love with it. But he brought those understandings that he had collected from India when he went to Sri Lanka, and he wrote the Visuddhimagga. So many of those elements come from there. Unfortunately, they permeated throughout the Buddhist circles in Southeast Asia and elsewhere. So that's where we have a long period of time where there was a confusion about the jhanas up until recently, when people went back to the suttas and left the commentaries where they need to be, on the shelf most of the time. I mean, they're there because, I mean, they can be very helpful, but not when it comes to just delving into the labyrinth or mazes of commentators' minds. We need to go back to the sutta, the discourses that are, however pure they still happen to be, in a pure state, that is. So coming back, thus you will enter and abide in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, mindfully one abides equanimous, experiencing happiness throughout. So you're seeing these states of mind as they occur. And another good sutta to look at or to listen to is the Anupada Sutta from the Majjhima Nikāya, the middle length discourses, Sutta number 111, where Venerable Sariputta goes through one after the other of these suttas. I'm sorry, the jhanas, up until the cessation. So let's move forward with this. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, then, for as long as you wish, as you dispel your attachment to happiness and sadness, and having already gone beyond joy and pain, you will enter and abide in the 4th jhana. Here you will feel the freedom from whatever is pleasant and whatever is painful, as you experience the purifying effect that mindfulness has brought you as you rest in equanimity. We live in a culture, or throughout our lives, we've been taught that we need to seek the pleasant, those things that cause us happiness, and we should shun, minimize the chances of the painful to occur. But we're basically going from one extreme of the pendulum to the other. And so long as that cradle action, I like to call it, is taking place, the mind is never going to reach that state of calmness, the tranquility, which will take us to experience freedom from samsara. So this is where the defilements, or you can even call it Mara, the great evil, deceptive one, plays a number on us throughout life. Especially in the context of the 4th jhana, because here is where things really get interesting. Because the mind reaches a point of stillness that is unprecedented up to this point. Oftentimes, we see in the suttas how the 4th jhana is used as like a launching pad for going and getting into psychic abilities and things like that. But the Buddha never really cared for those much. He mentions them, of course, several suttas, but ultimately his point was always to cut through samsara and attain arahantship first. Forget about everything else. If the rest are going to follow, fine. But this is not a state of indifference, mind you. When we say beyond the state of pleasant, experiencing the pleasant, or the painful, because typical misunderstanding is, oh, so the person is now indifferent, is like an automaton, is like a machine. No. Anything but. But you see these as they occur. You understand there's a deeper understanding of the Brahma Viharas, for example. But you're not pulled in. You have tremendous karuna, Remember, Upekkha is the within the Brahma Viharas is the last one. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. It's like the culmination of all the other three, if you will. So, by the way, I would like to finish the sutta and then have you guys ask questions. So I request that you write your question down about whatever segment it is that you want us to address, and we'll go back to that. And I don't have you on the screen, so I apologize if you're putting up a hand and I can't see it. So once we're done with the suttas, that's when you'll get a chance to address your questions. So further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, and by merely intending it and without any difficulty, you quickly attain these 4 jhanas, which constitute the higher mind, adicitta, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path. Resting way stations. They're not something that we pitch our tent or actually construct the rest of our lives on and thinking, that's it. I have reached the 4th jhana or 1st jhana and that's it. I've completed the holy life. It has been achieved. No, it hasn't. So these are resting way stations on the path. Then while living in such a state of contentment, even your rag robe will become for you like a multicolored and richly decorated robe worn by a rich householder or his son. Rag robes, because there is the practice of one of the Dhutangas, you might call them severe practices, where a bhikkhu says that he's only going to wear robes that he had picked up from cremation ground, from the cemetery, basically. The cloth that they would wrap, or they still do wrap, corpses in, and they're usually white. And then they would take those, clean them, shake off the dirt or whatever it had, and then wash them thoroughly so that it can accept the dye. And they would use a jackfruit, the heart of a jackfruit, or so that they can add the color. So, but over time, because the bhikkhu has only those 3 robes to cover himself and to sleep on, use as covers, etc., they start to, erode. They just weather, and just like, natural process. So they turn into rag robes. And that's what Lord Buddha is referring to here. For the bhikkhu, even those rags that he wears will give him such a tremendous satisfaction, as if it's like embroidered, fine fabric, silk or whatever, that is suitable for a rich householder or his son. That's how the person sees it and feels it and wears it. That's the most important part. For your robe will be enough for you, as it satisfies your delight, giving you a sense of relief, comfort, and a pleasant abiding as you enter into Nibbana. As you enter into Nibbana. Having that mindset will take you to Nibbana. But if we have come across any of the teachings of Lord Buddha, being the wonderful, amazing, par excellence teacher that he was, he would always offer more, just in case. Maybe the student might need this other paragraph. So let's move on. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, and by merely intending it and without any difficulty, you quickly attain these 4 jhanas. By the way, merely intending it. Many people think that in order for you to reach or experience the jhanas, you have to really struggle and push in order for you to get into each of these jhanas. If the person has been practicing the jhanas long enough, then all they have to do is just to intend it. And boom, they're in the 1st or 4th or even higher jhanas. That's how it works, if there is enough practice. So the mere intentionality brings about that state of, because your mind has gotten used to that. It knows what upekkha is in full force, meaning the fourth jhana. It knows how it feels, so it just comfies itself into it. So I wanted to add that in there. Again, which the four jhanas, which constitute the higher mind, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path. So this is where it repeats itself. But in all the translations and recordings I've been doing on for YouTube, for you to have free access to, I've always kept those repetitions. So I advise you not to, skip these. They're very important. The repetitions are very important, folks. If the Buddha put it there, we need to keep them. He did it for a certain reason. And no, it's not just the monks that later on added, like some commentators have said recently. So, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path, then while living in such a state of contentment, even the scraps of food you have for a meal will become for you like a richly flavored meal prepared for a rich, wealthy householder or his son, together with fine rice and various grains, as well as various soups and curries. For your scraps of food will be enough for you, as it satisfies your delight, giving you a sense of relief, comfort, and a pleasant abiding as you enter into Nibbana. The food that a bhikkhu eats, the way Lord Buddha advises us is, once we've shared the blessings of the food to the donor, whoever put something in there, and then we look at it, there's a moment that we have to take before consuming it. And in it there's also a series of verses, like a few lines, where we say in English, with proper wise attention, I am looking at the food, and I do not take it, I do not consume it for beauty, for its taste, for the pleasures that I'm looking forward to experiencing it, nor for beautifying my body, but simply to extend the life of this body and the aggregate so that I could attain the arahantship. That's why my attitude in eating this remains blameless. Anavajjata. It's a beautiful verse. So that way you can maintain the mindfulness even while you're chewing. And they say that Lord Buddha, when he ate rice or food, not even a single grain of rice would go down his throat without having been touched with mindfulness and his teeth. He would touch each of those grains while it was being chewed in his mouth, at least once, with mindfulness as it got gulped down. So that is the spirit that we bhikkhus aspire to experience and to maintain, because that also takes us straight to Nibbana, as we see here mentioned. So the bhikkhu doesn't care what it is in the food. It might be very bland, like soup or something. When they were used to eating like very sumptuous meals, they can't contrast anymore, because they're seeing this as simply feeding the four great elements: earth, water, fire, and air within the body that maintain these, at least the namarupa, to maintain, and to the rupa, a portion of it. And then the nama comes in with the feelings and memory being supported with the help of the body being nourished properly. So further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, and by merely intending it and without any difficulty, you quickly attain these 4 jhanas, which constitute the higher mind, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path. Then, while living in such a state of contentment, even your dwelling, that may be the root of a tree, Mula Rukha, the word is, it's like the root of a tree, will become for you like a richly gabled house, suitable for a rich householder or his son, beautifully plastered, painted, and decorated, with many doors and windows, with bolts and shutters to close and keep you protected from the elements outside. For your dwelling at the root of a tree will be enough for you, as it satisfies your delight, giving you a sense of relief, comfort, and a pleasant abiding as you enter into Nibbana. Imagine that, the freedom, that being outside, not being confined to any four walls. Now, this is not something that, this is one of the Dhutangas, of course, and where you're an open sky dweller, sometimes they're called. And there's a step higher to this, by the way, where the even staying sitting under dwelling under a tree, at the root of a tree, for some bhikkhus might seem like a luxury. For us, it's like funny almost, but it's because the tree does give us shelter from the rain, the sun, etc. And also having, like, it gives us the backing, which is a sense of safety, security, when we sit with our backs to the tree. They've done experiments on this, and they've seen that having our back against something rests the central nervous system better than having our back being completely open. Especially with trauma patients, they've seen, huge number differences in their experiments with or without it. So, but living in the open air, in a sense, open sky, you have complete 360 view and no protection. So that's a Dhuttanga as well. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, and by merely intending it, and without any difficulty, you quickly attain these 4 jhanas, which constitute the higher mind, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path, then while living in such a state of contentment, even your bed and cushion, made up of straw and grass, will become for you like a finely decorated bed and a cushion, suitable for a rich householder or his son, supported by a canopy above and a set of red bolsters at both ends, decked with blankets and exquisite pillows, all covered with antelope hide, which is very soft. For your bed and cushion, made of straw and grass, will be enough for you, as they satisfy your delight, giving you a sense of relief, comfort, and a pleasant abiding as you enter into Nibbana. So even your resting place where you sleep. Further, and this was a prince he's talking to. Anuruddha was a prince, just like he was. So they were very pampered growing up. And it wasn't like they became like samanas or novice monks at a young age. No, they had enjoyed all that was available to the 5 senses. So it's a huge contrast when you think of it, from that world into this. So we're beyond being Spartan here in what is available to us. Further, Anuruddha, whenever you reflect on these 8 thoughts of a great man, and by merely intending it, and without any difficulty, you quickly attain these 4 jhanas, which constitute the higher mind, as they are pleasant resting way stations on the path, then, while living in such a state of contentment, even your medicine of putrid and fermented cow's urine will become for you like various medicines prepared with fine quality purified ghee, butter, oil, and honey, suitable for a rich householder or his son. Yes, when I heard this years ago, like almost 30 years ago, I was like, putrid? Fermented cow urine? Why? But that was something that, they dry it, they boil it, and then they turn it into paste, and which they can carry with them. So if they had headaches or something, they would apply some of it. So apparently it has some medicinal qualities. To this day, there are some bhikkhus who do that, although I never came across them in my travels. But I'm sure they're, I've heard that they are there. And so, for your medicine of putrid and fermented cow's urine will be enough for you, as it satisfies your delight, giving you a sense of relief, comfort, and a pleasant abiding as you enter into Nibbana. Therefore, Anuruddha, you should stay here among the Chetis in the eastern bamboo park for your next rain's retreat. This is the instruction that Lord Buddha gave. This is the logistical part. When the Buddha gave an instruction like this, or any of the Arya Savakas to their students, that says something. It's almost like a guarantee that you keep doing what you're doing. And think about the Nippapancha, meaning the non-proliferation of thoughts, as your 8th thought of a great man. Use that, but you need to spend the next Vassa here, which is basically like a year, but the Vassa is 3 months period. So stay here, he says, for the next year and practice diligently. And Venerable, which means that you keep doing this, you're going to become one of us, an Arahant. And Venerable Anuruddha, delighted, says, yes, Bhante. And the Blessed One, having inspired, encouraged, and aroused the Venerable Anuruddha's energy to continue on the path with diligent effort, as quickly as a strong man would extend out his bent arm and bend his extended arm, suddenly disappeared from before the Venerable Anuruddha from the eastern bamboo forest in the land of the Chetis, and reappeared among the Sumsumara peaks in the land of the Bhaggas, at the Deer Park in the Bhesakala forest. Then the Blessed One sat on his prepared seat, as he addressed the bhikkhus thus: Bhikkhus, there are these 8 thoughts of a great man. Listen to them as I list them for you, and attend carefully. Yes, Bhante, replied the bhikkhus. And what are the 8 thoughts of a great man, bhikkhus? So he lists all those. I'm not going to list them because I want to make the most of our time and give you guys time to ask questions. He lists all those 7 that Venerable Anuruddha listed, plus the 8th of the non-proliferation of thought. And then he elaborates here. And what, bhikkhus, was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for one with few desires, and not for the one with many desires? Here, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu is of few desires, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I am with few desires. Basically the opposite of what today's influencer society is trying to have us do. We do something, we feed the dog, and all of a sudden there's a picture of it that we posted, and everyone needs to know that we're doing this. And sadly, with all this pandemic, and I've seen so many people doing lovely things to people, let's say taking food, getting medicine. Unfortunately, though, the intention might say something else, because as if there's like a whole camera crew waiting for them to take the shot of them handing the food to these people. Why? Let that action be beautiful. Don't sully it. If the intention was to actually make another human being healthy and happy, and not put yourself out there, which what today's culture promotes. So, and by the way, it's not just non-Buddhist circles. I've seen this a lot, especially within the monastic communities in Asia and elsewhere. So, number 2, while being content and satisfied, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I am content and satisfied. Showing off, basically. Who cares if other people knew or not? Like, I'm content and satisfied. That's all that matters. They're going to reap the benefits too, because my actions are going to simply reflect that. My words are going to reflect that. 3, while being comfortable with and looking for seclusion, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I delight in seclusion. There's one teacher, not from the Theravada tradition, who is very well known nowadays, apparently. And wherever he goes, there's like a group of cameramen and doing a documentary. And I was excited to see that he was going to go into seclusion. That's what his students had been saying and posting. And then there was like a preview of what this going to be, which was strange for me. What do you mean by prelude or preview? And then I saw that throughout those 3 months or 1 year, the camera crew was going to be with him recording every day. Where does the seclusion part come in here? Like, what's happening with that? And because there's segments of it that they were showing in this very short clip from different time periods of that 1 year. So that was like, I had to scratch my head over that one. So that's not what this is, that the Buddha is advocating for us. So the opposite of that. In number 4, in being diligent with aroused effort, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I am diligent with aroused effort. Similarly, 5, in being established in continuous mindfulness, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I am established in continuous mindfulness. 6, while dwelling in the stability of the heart, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I dwell in the stability of the heart. 7, in being wise, the bhikkhu does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I am wise. And 8, while delighting in and enjoying the non-proliferation of concepts, he does not trouble himself with the thought, oh, may others know that I delight in and enjoy the non-proliferation of thoughts. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what was meant with the statement, this Dhamma is for one with few desires and not for the one with many desires. And what, bhikkhus, was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for one content and satisfied and not for one who is discontent or dissatisfied? Here, the bhikkhu is content and satisfied with whatever he may obtain, whether in the type of robes, scraps of morsels of food, dwellings, and any medical requisites when needed, which he receives. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what was meant with the statement, this Dhamma is for one content and satisfied, and not for one who is discontent or dissatisfied. And what, bhikkhus, was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for one who looks for seclusion and not for one who delights in company or enjoys associating with others? Here, the bhikkhu, the secluded bhikkhu, may be approached by bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female lay disciples, kings and their ministers, those of other sects and their disciples. But while being surrounded by such visitors, the bhikkhu's mind naturally flows inwards. A word that we have is opanayiko. It's very, it's the same thing. As it has the organic disposition to incline and be directed to seclusion. For his mind delights in constantly giving up and withdrawing into and delighting in renunciation. And while he speaks to them with this underlying intention of dismissing them, he doesn't say, okay, you guys, okay, leave me alone, but they're just the bhikkhu is trying to say what needs to be said to set them on their way, and just he can go back into that state. So he wants to send them away as soon as possible. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what was meant with the statement, this Dhamma is for one who looks for seclusion and not for one who delights in the company or enjoys associating with others. We are social beings, but that is what's on the mundane level. As we go deeper and deeper and deeper into the practice and our lives start to reflect the Dhamma, they reflect all the characteristics of the triple gem in a sense, the mind wants to become more and more secluded. Suddenly, even those individuals that you really like, you really love, you'll take them in smaller doses. you won't be taking them like, wholesale, as it were. So you will seek out those moments where you're just by yourself and allowing the mind to settle more and more and more, because you're tasting something that is super mundane. And what bhikkhus was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for one who is diligent with aroused effort, not for the lazy. Here, the bhikkhu lives diligent and with aroused effort as he abandons unwholesome behaviors and develops wholesome ones, staying resolute and committed to his practice on the path, while being firmly determined not to give up the main aim of doing and cultivating wholesome and good actions. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what was meant with the statement, the Dhamma is for one who is diligent with aroused effort, not for the lazy. Self-explanatory. And what bhikkhus was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for one established in continuous mindfulness, not for one lacking in mindfulness. Here, the bhikkhu possesses and maintains awareness of himself and his thoughts in a continuous manner, always bearing in mind and recollecting things pondered upon, heard, done, and said from long ago. So you're looking at them, but you're not being pulled into them. You're aware. And as these come into your purview, into your screen of awareness, the mind of the bhikkhu is also picking up what these thoughts are, these memories, sanya, are generating in the body or in the feeling, vedana. What is this generating? Is there like or dislike? Is there love or hate towards these things? And you're even observing those instead of siding with either one. And then the bhikkhu's mind is also paying attention as to whether these things will take off and go into sankharas. They will get into mental formations, into constructions of new ideas, basically papanchas, mental proliferation of thoughts. So you are basically practicing the satipatthana in either way, because remember, as I was saying earlier, these things constantly shapeshift. The awareness goes somewhere, the consciousness rather goes into different ones. Once it's the body sensation feeling, and all of a sudden it switches to a memory that came. And now you're pulled into feeling some way. And why am I feeling that? Oh, yes, because of the memory. Or you're pulled away completely from your object of meditation. So the meditator who is practicing the satipatthana, the seven establishments, seven factors of factors of mindfulness. I'm sorry, 4 foundations of mindfulness. Sorry, numbers. 4 foundations of mindfulness: body, feeling, mind, citta, and dhamma, the relationship of phenomena of these principles. Then you're always with it. You're always observing. That is what is being meant here by the statement of continuous mindfulness carried through all throughout. And what, bhikkhus, was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for the one who has the stability of the heart, not for the distracted. Here, the bhikkhu, by secluding the mind from sensual desires and unwholesome states of mind, enters and abides in the first jhana. So he goes through all these jhanas like he did with Venerable Anuruddha. So I won't read that because I've already read it today and I want to save time. And then he goes through the whole list of the 4 jhanas. And then he goes, and what bhikkhus was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for the wise, not for those lacking in wisdom. Here, the bhikkhu is wise, as he possesses the discernment, the wisdom, to see the arising and the vanishing of the 5 aggregates as they truly are and come to be. And this penetrative noble wisdom leads the bhikkhu to the complete destruction of all suffering. The 5 aggregates. Remember, I was mentioning how they shift. Sometimes it's the body, all of a sudden it's the feeling, and then the memory. But we won't know any of these things from that might be occurring, and they are occurring all the time. If there's no mindfulness, if there is no invested energy into observing them and not letting them pass us by without any drop of awareness of them. That's where the wisdom is going to come in and allow us to see the suffering that the aggregates bring, because the aggregates, the khandas, are suffering. The cure is the Dhamma. The practice of the Dhamma is the cure. Otherwise, the aggregates will never give us anything that is that is the opposite of impermanent, meaning permanent. The aggregates can never give us anything other than instability, emptiness, unreliability, and impermanence, and dukkha, suffering. So, moving on, and what bhikkhus was meant by the statement, this Dhamma is for the one who delights in the non-proliferation of thoughts, the one who enjoys non-proliferation of ideas or concepts, and not for those who delight in the constant proliferation of thoughts, or the ones who enjoy the constant proliferation of ideas or concepts. Here, the bhikkhu's mind is clear, calmly confident, and energized as it decidedly finds liberation through the ceasing of all proliferation. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what was meant with the statement, this Dhamma is for the one who delights in non-proliferation of thoughts. And it continues, ends the sentence like I just read up there. And then the sutta goes, meanwhile, as instructed and while following the teacher's guidance, the Venerable Anuruddha spent the following rains retreat as well in the eastern bamboo forest among the Chetis. Then the Venerable Anuruddha, while living alone, secluded and withdrawn from the crowd, energetic and diligently working while maintaining continuity of mindfulness throughout, before long he realized for himself directly, with unshakable wisdom, and through his own efforts, the supreme goal of the holy life, for the purpose of which good sons of families rightfully leave the household life and go forth, becoming homeless. And by entering upon it, he dwelled in that unshakable serenity of the heart. Right then, he knew for himself, birth is now finally destroyed. The holy life has been lived. Whatever work that had to be done has now been completed. There is no more return to any state of becoming. Thus the Venerable Anuruddha became one of the Arahats. And right at that moment he uttered these majestic verses. The Supreme Teacher in the universe came to me with his psychic powers, having seen my thoughts. Delighting in non-proliferation himself, the teacher taught me, his own disciple, in non-proliferation. Now, having learned his Dhamma, I delight in having done his bidding, for I have now attained the three knowledges, and with it I completed my duty in the Lord's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. By the way, the three knowledges are the knowledge of one's own past lives, as well, and the second one is they just show up. And the second one is the knowledge of knowing the death and birth of beings in different realms. And when the person is dying, the Arahant will know where their destination will be. It's like watching a channel, TV channel, and you just have the remote and you just look and you see basically. All they have to do is look at that or intend it. And the third one is the knowledge of the destruction of the contaminants, the asavas. Asavakaya, the destruction of the contaminants. So it was a long sutta, and I tried to squeeze it in our time we have, but it's a wonderful sutta, as you can tell. But I will pause here and open up for questions. Again, please jump in and turn your camera on so I can see you when we're hearing you. No questions? Or comments?
Oh,
yes, someone's speaking.
Maybe I could ask a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Bhante. There seems to be a strain of, well, this is a superficial comment, but of being an ascetic, asceticism that runs through, many of the points that you bring up, weekly, and especially today with the sadhu, living under the tree. And I had bought a book one time where they have all these Indian sadhus. I think they're not necessarily Buddhist, but some are living under trees or in cremation grounds, various places. Is asceticism seems to be necessary for across many belief systems, including Buddhism. Is the purpose to basically make you divorce from, material things, desire, and so forth, and then of course it kind of refocuses your energy? It seems to actually, well, I'm not a strong person, so it seems very difficult to actually carry out unless you are a bhikkhu or you have a certain level of commitment, and so forth. So I was just wondering whether you could talk more about the ascetic type of maybe tradition in many of the comments that you've made. Thank you.
Asceticism is definitely part of the teaching, but how? Let me say it this way: is there the presence of wisdom in it or not? So there's a way that the Buddhist path has begun and has flourished throughout the centuries, was done because of the understanding that not asceticism by itself per se minus the wisdom, but in conjunction with. Now, asceticism or renunciation, like Nikāya, for example, is a way to, yes, turn your back on what this material world keeps on telling you that you need in order for you to be happy. In that sense, absolutely. So long as a person is, the material world has its claws in you, and you're always engaged in getting more of pleasant experiences and less of painful experiences, then you are basically being had. You're completely deceived, and you are just a puppy. You're not a puppy, you're a puppet in the hands of the five aggregates. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that Buddhism is just a matter of us making some donation, going and doing pujas, and then I can just submerge myself back into the deep waters of life in the sense of the sensual world, and be in the cradle again, going from one extreme, and life comes and says, no, buddy, come over here. I'm going to give you some pain. Because we are latching on to things that are devoid of wisdom, because I'm latching on to my six senses. I want to see beautiful things only, not ugly. I want to taste only great things, delicious things, etc., etc. So long as a person is in that world, spirituality is far from that person. Now, this is the life that actually all of these princes, including Lord Buddha, lived. They had so much luxury that we cannot even dream of today. People living in the Buckingham Palace in the UK cannot comprehend the level of luxury that they had. There's one bhikkhu who was so pampered, and he was lifted off the ground. He didn't even have to go to the bathroom. They had to, his servants and people in the palaces, one of the, many palaces, so they would take him to the bathroom. They would do everything for him, everything. And to the point where the bottom of his feet actually had started growing hair. Imagine that. And then years later, when he realized the emptiness of all this because he was still unfulfilled. That's the dukkha part. Now, having said these things, and by the way, he becomes a bhikkhu and he goes and he does chankama, walking meditation. And because his feet were not used to walking, suddenly he's walking and he's got so much energy, virya, and he's really diligently wanting to attain and understand that his feet started to bleed. And that's when the Buddha introduced, that those bhikkhus who don't want to walk barefoot, they can actually wear slippers. We owe it to this bhikkhu. But coming back to whether asceticism is absolutely necessary for us to taste Dhamma, no. Now, what I mean by that is there needs to be the understanding as a layperson, because many, many, many of the Lord Buddha's disciples were lay disciples, upasakas and upasikas, many of whom had reached the first stage of awakening, sotapanna, the second stage of awakening, sakadagami, which is a once returner, as well as a non-returner, anagami. So please don't, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that, no, if I'm in life, if I have responsibilities, then this Dhamma is not for me. No, that's just your defilements talking. So it's not an approach of either or, because there is that either or tone in your question. It's either black or white. It's I'm neither that. No. There needs to be wisdom applied, meaning, can I maintain my responsibilities as a lay person by keeping sila? Sila. I know you've taken the 5 precepts. How much are we practicing 5 sila? Many people take it every day, but when push comes to shove during the day, it goes out the window. That is the opportunity for you to really be practicing the Dhamma as a lay person who enjoys fine dining. Okay? 2, is there practice, or am I wasting my time? When I sit, am I playing with my ideas, my papanchas, or am I genuinely sitting for those 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or whatever, hour? So is there truthfulness, or am I just winging it? And this will take us to wisdom. So these 3 trainings are there available to all of us, whether bhikkhu or not. But unfortunately, many of individuals, bhikkhu and otherwise, again, many people do not approach the practice of Dhamma as they would approach driving a car, for example, or doing your job. You're a professor, you teach. Can you one day, not start to wing it when you're teaching classes, the lesson plans, the assignments, and just, I'm going to give this person an A? You're soon going to be fired, right? So you take your job much more seriously than you would the Dhamma. That's the problem. So it's not the fact that you're a layperson that you're not attaining or whatever. No, it's the attitude. The lay life does not exclude a person from attaining at all. It's the attitude that we have towards the practice that's, unfortunately in this case, detrimental to our progress. We have more attention being given to cooking, to paying our bills, to make sure that when we're writing those zeros down in the check or whatever, or putting in our PIN number in our ATM machine, we are very much aware. We're so mindful, so sharp. And we check the numbers. Is that the right amount of money that I have in my bank account? Now, if we can just bring a 1/1000th of that awareness into our daily lives as the thoughts are going all over the place, that's when we get closer to experiencing the Dhamma. So it's not the robes that make a person awakened. There's hundreds of thousands of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis now. And I know Ajahn Mahabua would say the hell realms are full of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. What does that say? So it's not, and he was an arahant, by the way. He could validate that. So let us bring the attention back where it needs to be, not on the asceticism part. That's not the issue. It's how much am I able to maintain my mindfulness and awareness and responsibility in living my life. Many people are more responsible in making sure the mask is on before they leave the house. They checking their numbers, everything. Where am I going to go? What am I going to touch? Sterilizing themselves to bits, sanitizing themselves to bits, where white cells are not even working anymore, white blood cells. So we have more dedication to that than we do for the Dhamma, because it's like a very yeah, sure, it's there like an insurance policy that you keep paying premiums to once a month. It's expecting it to be there when push comes to shove, maybe. So that is what I would offer in response to that. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? What's the time? Oh. I want to add about Venerable Anuruddha. After he became an arahant, for years people were asking him, how, Bhante, did you become an arahant? And he always explained it by using the Satipatthana. He would say, thanks to the Satipatthana. There's several suttas in the Samyutta Nikāya and elsewhere. They're short suttas compared to this one. They always are like leading the person back to, please don't underestimate the power of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthanas. He's like, wherever I went, whatever I did, sati was with me, he says. So that to me was, when I first read it some time ago, it was very, very encouraging. Because I noticed in my own practice years ago, for many years actually, I was just dedicating my sati as if to one portion of my day. No one had taught me this, but it's just, I was thinking that that's how it's supposed to be done. And then when I was reading the suttas and pondering them and going over them, I saw that no, it has to be reflected throughout one's life. Even when you think that it's not appropriate, perhaps, or necessary. That's another one that the defilements love. Just as a side note. Any other thoughts, questions before we close? I can't see hands, so if you have something, just come on, say it. Okay. So let us dedicate the merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the acquisition and achievement of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for being here. Thank you for putting in the effort. But today's sutta and other suttas before and that are to come, may they help us to reevaluate our position, our attitude towards the practice, and create that eagerness to end suffering. The Dhamma is in the heart, so are the defilements. Therefore, so is the suffering, true suffering. So my hope is that your practice will develop, and so we can attain the highest goal of the holy life. May you be well. See you next week.